Hi everyone and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is Frank. I am the commissioner of Heel Heat. Unfortunately, George was suspended due to conduct unbecoming to the advancement of Heel Heat. So, in his absence, we have El Hijo del Mushroom Head to replace him until such time that his suspension is over. I will now leave it to him.
Thank you, Frank. My name is El Hijo del Mushroom Head, and I'm here to fill in for George as he takes a suspension. On this episode, we're doing It Came From the Network. Topic of this, It Came From the Network, Best of WWE Horror Icons. And I was going on to watch something totally different, but I seen this being promoted, and I figured with Halloween being the theme, and we're in the middle of the Halloween season at the time this is being recorded, it's just a few days away, why not review this? And if you haven't seen these Best of WWE, it's basically compilation videos that they put together. I think they do them weekly. I don't normally watch them unless there's a topic that I want to watch, like this one, but usually they're pretty cool. And if you're wanting to search this out and it's no longer within this week, it's going to be marked as season 4 episode 10 there. With that being said, we do rate our videos here on a 1 to 5 scale. 5 is the best, 1 is the worst. Let's jump right in with the first match from Survivor Series 1991. Hulk Hogan defending the World Heavyweight Championship against The Undertaker. This is very early on in The Undertaker's run. I believe it was only a year previous that he debuted at WWE, and you could tell he's nowhere near the wrestler he would become in later years. He had the gimmick down, he had the aura down, but he didn't have the ring work quite where he would later. This more felt akin to a normal Hulk Hogan versus generic big guy match than it did to an Undertaker match. It is really cool when you see kind of the guy for the generation before Undertaker against the guy that basically, in my opinion, is the face of WWE for so long in The Undertaker. He may not have always been the most popular wrestler or the most beloved, but he was always in the mix for that and always one of the most beloved and one of the most popular. This, again, like I said, it's early on. He's kind of slow and prodding, which if you remember the early Undertaker career, he really was at that time. Undertaker picks up the win when Ric Flair comes to ringside and slides a chair in the ring for him to do a tombstone onto Hogan with, thus creating the need for This Tuesday in Texas, which was like 4 days later. The match itself was okay. I'm going to give it a little bit more for The Undertaker's presence, and you could see the star there. He just wasn't there yet. I'm going to give this one a 3. I thought it was good. Not great. I don't think you put this on a list of either of their greatest matches. I don't think this makes any other compilations other than this kind of a list. But yeah, it was decent. Not anything different than what you might have seen from like Hogan vs. Big John Studd or any of the other big guys of the era that he wrestled with. So I can't give it much more than that. Next up, from Halloween Havoc from 91 again, we have the Chamber of Horrors match with El Gigante, Sting, who I'm wearing his shirt, awesome wrestler, and the Steiner brothers going up against Cactus Jack, Abdullah the Butcher, Big Van Vader, and the Diamond Stud. And if you're not familiar with the Diamond Stud, that's Scott Hall pre-Razor Ramon. This is probably one of the most campy matches, one of the most derided matches in wrestling history. I don't necessarily think of it as negatively as a lot of people are. Yes, there's problems, and yes, it's not the greatest match of all time, but it's a spectacle. I don't ever think it was meant to be a 5-star Meltzer match. I think it was always meant to be a spectacle. Do I think they pulled it off to the best of their ability? Probably not. The problems with the light switch, everybody has talked about on every review that's ever been done on this. The quote-unquote electric chair is a little bit goofy. The fact that it took up half of the ring, there wasn't a whole bunch of room, even with the giant cage going around the ring for 8 wrestlers to wrestle in. The fact that you had some of the greatest wrestlers of the generation in this match with Vader, Sting, the Steiners, Cactus Jack, and Scott Hall as the Diamond Stud. With some of the other wrestlers, El Gigante's probably the standout as not being on par with everyone else. Even Abdullah, who's not looked at as a great wrestler, was a great gimmick and perfect for this kind of match. It's been talked about ad nauseum. I believe WrestleCrap has covered it. Any Worst of WCW has talked about this match. I don't think about it as negatively as most people do. I kind of get it from what they were trying to accomplish here. The face team of the Sting, Steiner, and El Gigante pick up the win when Rick Steiner basically belly-to-bellies Abdullah into the chair, and this is one of the reasons why people deride it. It takes them a super long time, and the whole time Cactus Jack is at the switch thinking Abdullah has Rick Steiner in the chair, and it takes an extremely long time to get Abdullah strapped down, and Cactus kind of has to pretend like he's not looking, all while Rick Steiner struggles. Cactus flips a switch, Abdullah gets electrocuted, which kind of looked goofy and silly, and yeah, it really was. Afterwards, he gets revived by Cactus and they tear through the ghouls who were at ringside to stretcher him out, which was a bunch of guys with white face paint on and looked like powder in their hair. So when Abby and Cactus hit him, powder would fly everywhere. This wasn't a great match. I don't think it's one of the all-time worst. I think it gets a lot worse recognition than in what it deserves. I'm giving this one a 2. Again, I've seen a lot worse than this. A lot of matches that I have absolutely no fun watching. There was some fun things in this. So again, I'm going to give it a 2. Next up, from WWF Superstars, from May 16th, 1992, we have The Ultimate Warrior versus Brian Knobbs. And while you see the theme so far, it doesn't stick out right away in this. This was during the feud between The Ultimate Warrior and Papa Shango, who was cursing the Warrior and putting voodoo spells on him at the time. After the Warrior wins this match, because we see Papa Shango come down and steal one of the Warrior's wristbands, Papa Shango comes back out. Warrior starts grabbing his side, kind of like his appendix is bursted, which is one of the things they say it might happen on commentary. However, Mr. Perfect is playing it up perfectly, saying how it is a voodoo spell that has been put on him. This is famously when the Warrior's taken to the back and he throws up or vomits some green pea soup on one of the doctors that is checking on him. Kind of goofy, kind of campy. I wish they would have shown when Papa Shango cursed the Warrior and he had the black ink coming down. I think that was more on par with what this is. This to me is the lesser of those two things, and I kind of wish they did that. I'm not sure why they didn't. Overall, the match wasn't great. The gimmick a little bit cool. I always did like Papa Shango. I'm gonna give this one a 2. Again, it's not the greatest thing. I understand thematically why it's here, but again, it's just not great. Next up, we have from WrestleMania 9, Doink the Clown versus Crush. And up until this point, this was my favorite match on the card, my most fun match watching back, and probably one of my favorite matches from WrestleMania 9. This was when Doink was still being played by Matt Bourne. He still had that menacing aura to him. He still had that different gear where Doink wasn't as campy as it would go on to be. Crush was in his full-on Hawaiian Crush gimmick where he was wearing the purple and orange. And I gotta say, it's something I forgot, but Crush had a superior mullet at this time. The blonde mullet, and it just looked amazing. I mean, there's not a lot more you could say about it. If you want to know what 1990 or 91 or whatever this was looked like, it's Crush. Mullets and bright colors, that was the style. This is also famously the match where there's two different Doinks where they do the mirror with each other. The one Doink hits Crush with a prosthetic leg or prosthetic arm, which he had hit him with previously leading up in this feud. Kind of a fun match, not overly great. Doink does pick up the win here. I'm giving this one a 3. Like I said, it's my favorite of the matches so far, but not super great. That's followed up with a time jump to about 5 years later, where we get The Undertaker and Mankind in their Buried Alive match. Again, I really like this match. I might have went with the Boiler Room match because of more of the theme, but the Buried Alive still fits the theme. I think the Boiler Room match is a better match, personally, of the two. But this isn't a bad match. It's keeping in the tradition of, like, the last match. Now this is my favorite match of the card so far, or of the show so far. So they're building a bit where the matches are getting better and better and more enjoyable. This was really fun. This is where I think, in my estimation, where I previously spoke about The Undertaker, where he took a giant leap. His matches with Mankind not only made Mankind into WWE, I think they really rejuvenated The Undertaker and made him a different wrestler, made him a more in-ring based wrestler, showed more of his talent off than the lumbering guy that battled giants and battled monsters. I thought this was a really fun match. The Undertaker does pick up the win. However, the tide gets turned and Mankind, Paul Bearer, the Executioner, who's Terry Gordy under a mask. I don't know why anybody that's known would wear a mask for anything. If they already know who you are, why are you wearing a mask? That's just silly in my opinion. Other heels of the time, Crush, this was during his prison Crush phase. Justin Hawk Bradshaw, they all come out and start shoveling dirt on the Undertaker. This we get the famous scene where they're all shoveling the dirt on him, and the Undertaker's hand comes up, much like Freddy Krueger did at the end of one of the Friday the 13th movies. This to me was really good. I'm giving this a 4. Next up, we have another time jump to about 5-6 years later. From the October 28th, 2002 episode of Monday Night Raw, we have Kane versus Triple H in a casket match. And yes, this was part of the Kane Triple H feud that involved Katie Vick, which the less said about that, the better. However, I don't think you could have a bad Kane and Triple H match. These are two of the premier wrestlers of their generation, in my estimation. I really like Kane. I'm a huge fan of Kane. I think Triple H is one of the best wrestlers that's ever done it. This was a really fun match again. Keeping on par with what we just seen with Undertaker and Mankind, this was really good, and really good for a 2002 Monday Night Raw match, which at the time, Monday Night Raw was on a little bit of a downslope coming off the end of the Attitude Era. But this was really good. I really enjoyed this. We see the end come where Shawn Michaels comes out, and this was before he was back full time. He super kicks Triple H, which helps Kane to give him the tombstone and then roll him into the casket and basically win the match. And I thought this was a really fun, really good match. I'm giving this one a 4. Next up, we probably have my least favorite thing that's on this compilation. It's a Piper's Pit from SmackDown on January 13th, 2006. And his guests are first JBL and Julian Hall. If you remember, this is the era where Jillian Hall had the growth on the side of her face, which we'll get to that in a moment. JBL is down talking and condescending to Piper, which leads Piper to bring out his guest, which was initially to be his guest, the Boogeyman. And you may already know where this is going if you watched WWE at the time, or much like the Chamber of Horrors, you've seen some of the bad things that have happened in pro wrestling. Boogeyman comes out, scares off JBL. Jillian stays in the ring. He takes a look at her growth on her face, which always looked fake to me. It always kind of looked like an oatmeal cookie stuck on there. He starts licking it, and then we get the infamous moment where he bites the growth off and starts chewing on it. I'm glad they took the growth off of Jillian's face because she's a beautiful woman, and it really wasn't helping anything. It didn't do anything for the character at all. However, I think this is bad. I think this is hokey. People point to stuff like the Shockmaster and say that's one of the worst things that's ever happened, or the previously mentioned for a moment in the last match, Katie Vick incident. I think this is one that's right up there with all of those that people don't put into that as much. There are aspects of the Boogeyman I liked. I really enjoyed his feud with Booker T, mostly because of how Booker T played off of him. And the Boogeyman as a character, I don't full stop right off. I think there are some fun things about him. This was not one of them. This to me was a really terrible segment. I did not enjoy this at all. I kind of wish they would have shown one of the Boogeyman and Sharmell and Booker T segments instead of this. I don't know why they didn't. To me, those are more creepy, better enjoyment comes out of them. I don't know, that probably is a weird sentence, but I like those segments a whole lot more. For this segment, I'm giving this a big fat 0. I know I said we're 1 to 5, but sometimes they're just so bad that you can't even give it a 1. I did not enjoy this at all, and it had one of my favorite wrestlers of all time involved, Roddy Piper. JBL I really like. Boogeyman's a guy, like I said, I don't have any problem with him. He's normally entertaining. This just didn't do anything for me. That's followed up with a match from SummerSlam 2013, a Ring of Fire match, which is said to be the debut of Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt going up against Kane. If you remember when Bray Wyatt debuted, he immediately threw himself in a feud and the Wyatt family in a feud with Kane. And immediately, the first thing that came to my mind was Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper. And God, it's just so heartbreaking seeing both of these supremely talented wrestlers. No disrespect to Eric Rowan because he's supremely talented too. I like him. I don't know why he isn't employed by one of the major companies in wrestling right now, whether it be WWE or AEW or even New Japan. Hell, if I was the NWA or Impact, which is going to be TNA again soon, I would give the man a contract. I think he's a good wrestler, and he really added something to the Wyatt family. But seeing Bray Wyatt, seeing Luke Harper, aka Brody Lee, and knowing that they both died young, it's gut-wrenching. It hurts a bit. This match, however, was extremely fun. The Ring of Fire was basically a ring of fire around the ring. Kind of like an Inferno match, but the fire was right up there on the, basically, level with the ring. It was meant to keep the Wyatt family out and keep Bray and Kane in, and it was cool. I liked the effects they did on it, where the fire would jump when someone would hit the mat, kind of accentuating the positives, accentuating the impact. These are two wrestlers, again, I just told you about how much I enjoy Kane, and Bray Wyatt is an absolute great wrestler, absolutely a guy that understood his gimmick and knew what to do with the gimmick. This was a really fun introduction to what Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family would do and what they could become. Ultimately, there is a fireman at the side of the ring who at one point puts out a burning kendo stick that the Wyatt family is trying to get into Bray. They also notice that he has an asbestos blanket, which they steal from him and use it to put out the fire so they can get involved and come and beat down Kane, leading to Bray Wyatt picking up the win here. I thought this was extremely fun. I really enjoyed this. I loved looking back at this in retrospective. I love seeing things with Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper and just getting to remember how great they were. Rest in peace to both of these guys because they were absolutely amazing. It still hurts the wrestling community that they are both passed away now, but this was amazing. I absolutely love this. I'm giving this one a 5. Next up, we have another one of the most infamous matches in wrestling history. We get Damian Priest versus The Miz from WWE WrestleMania Backlash 2021. And you may already know where we're going with this. This is the Lumberjack Match, where the Lumberjacks were zombies. It was a tie-in to Army of the Dead, I think, was a movie that Batista was in. It was a Netflix exclusive. I don't think I ever watched the movie. I might go back and watch it. I don't know if it's good. Let me know in the comments if you watch it, if it was any good. But this match-wise, it was good. Priest and Miz did a good job. The hokiness of the zombies, the fact that this was in the Thunderdome era, which, God, I am so glad we are out of the Thunderdome era. It was so bad and so lifeless. And that's just the fan aspect, not including the zombies. This was terrible. Damian Priest picks up the win here. I'm going to give it a 2 because Priest and Miz did the best they could with this. I don't think you couldn't have put Gunther and Will Ospreay in here and expected them to pull out a masterpiece. This was terrible. I can't blame it on the Miz or Priest. I blame it on the zombies and the goofiness of it. Last but not least, we get from WrestleMania 36, the Firefly Funhouse match, John Cena versus Bray Wyatt. And this is one of those matches, depending on who you are, you either love it or you hate it. If you don't like cinematic matches, you're going to hate this. If you're okay with cinematic matches, you probably love this. In my opinion, this is the best cinematic match I've seen. It's right there on par with the Hardy Boys deletion matches, which I think were all really good. But to me, for my money, I think this is the best of all of them. This is better than the Boneyard match, better than basically any of the other ones. that I've seen, because it really feels like they told Bray Wyatt this match and they let him do whatever he wanted, and John Cena went along with it for the ride. And kudos to John for doing that, because he really made Bray look like an absolute genius here. This was a tour through the career of John Cena, from his Ruthless Aggression debut to his Doctor of Thugonomics run, and it was all Bray Wyatt using that as mind games to get in the head of John Cena. There was homages to Hulk Hogan in Saturday Night's Main Event, and Cena being basically the Hulk Hogan of his generation. At every turn, Cena kind of got outsmarted by Bray Wyatt. During the Hulk Hogan portion, he was doing curls, and he basically wore himself out where he couldn't take a swing at him. In the Ruthless Aggression, where Bray Wyatt was taking the spot of Kurt Angle, he ducked every one of Cena's shots. In the Doctor of Thugonomics portion, Cena was extra corny and it didn't really work out that well. Then we go to an homage to Monday Nitro. Again, Cena's put in the Hulk Hogan role, playing Hogan as Hollywood Hogan, but this time I guess being Hollywood Cena, and teasing the heel turn that never came from Cena. God, it was so good. And then we get to the end where it's Cena versus Bray, and Bray is the Fiend. And God, it was just amazing how this all worked out. This was like a movie within a wrestling show, within a wrestling event. And this was another one that took place in the Thunderdome era, but it's probably one of the things that I will think of most positively about that era. This, the Drew McIntyre championship win. There's a couple other things that I think of so positively, but I really enjoyed this. This was really an amazing match, an amazing piece of artistry in my opinion. This was Bray Wyatt at his most creative. Bray does pick up the win here as the Fiend, and this was just amazing. I really enjoyed this. This is something I wish we would have seen more of this, and I think we were getting there with the Uncle Howdy stuff, unfortunately before Bray passed. This was just so cool. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, my favorite cinematic match that's ever been done. I'm giving this one a solid 5. I can't say much more without gushing over it. It was really enjoyable. Overall, this compilation was hit and miss. We had some great things like Undertaker and Mankind, the Firefly Funhouse, Kane and Triple H. We had some not so great things like the Chamber of Horrors, the Boogeyman Piper's Pit segment, the Army of the Dead Lumberjack match, which again, just stupid. It was very up and down. However, thematically, I think it really worked. For Halloween, this was a really good compilation. This, even with its goofiness, it was all on brand. It was all in part of a bigger enjoyment. I really liked this. Yes, I might have switched out a couple things here. Maybe added some of the vignettes like Chucky stalking Rick Steiner, some of the Dungeon of Doom stuff maybe. You know, some other creepy elements that were in here. Bring them into this. Something from Jake the Snake Roberts, maybe. But I really can't complain. For basically a 3-hour compilation, it really was on brand. It really showed us the iconic horror wrestlers, whether it's Abdullah the Butcher, Papa Shango, Dink, Bray Wyatt, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, even the Boogeyman. Some of the iconic horror-themed characters in WWE history and in wrestling history. So I gotta say, it did live up to my expectations. Overall, I'm gonna say as a compilation, it is better than the sum of its parts. I'm giving it a 4. I do recommend checking it out, especially if you're looking for some Halloween themed or horror themed enjoyment during this Halloween season. It's very enjoyable. With that being said, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member definitely helps us out here. With all that being said, if you made it here to the end, let me know who your most iconic horror-themed wrestler was. Was it Kane, The Undertaker, any of the people here? Someone that wasn't mentioned, maybe Kevin Sullivan in his Army of Darkness, maybe one of the monster gimmicks from FMW like Leatherface. Let me know down here in the comments what your favorite horror-themed wrestler was. With all that being said, my name is El Hijo del Mushroom Head, and this has been another It Came From the Network.